One of the most important things you should do for your Revit MEP design practice is to create a custom project template. So in this video, I will show you step by step how I created a company electrical project template. But many of the concepts that I cover are applicable to the other trades as well. And at the end of this video, I will show you the specific custom families that are contained within that template. So stay tuned for a very detailed, in-depth lesson. Let's get right into it. Before we jump into Revit, I've got a couple things to cover. First of all, I know a lot of firms and other departments that I've worked with have kind of procrastinated on getting that template set up. They want to create this all-encompassing perfect template that has everything they would ever need for projects. But I would advise that you at least just get started, get a beginner template going to take care of, 90% of the startup tasks that you do when you start a new project. That will greatly improve your efficiency. Second thing is there's a couple different ways you can actually set up a template. Revit has a built-in template format available, which is what we will use today. But some firms actually create a project, an actual Revit project that becomes a template for their projects. And in there you can have more things like work sets and links of other files, things like that. There's pros and cons to both, but in this one we will start with the actual template file. And as it turns out, what you don't put in that template can be as important as what you do put in that template. You don't want a lot of fluff and distraction. Some considerations are, what version should you create this template in? I advise that you use the oldest version of Revit that you would create projects in. Now, as consultants, we end up creating projects to match our clients, typically the architects. So, for example, even though it's Revit 2025 is out, I won't be using it for years because a lot of our projects are still being created in Revit 2022. So this template will be in Revit 2022. A big question is, how many templates should you have? You do different kinds of projects. Maybe you're a small firm, maybe you're a one-person practice that does all MEP disciplines. Should you put all of those into one template, into one model? Those are considerations to look at. Personally, I've found that keeping at least electrical separate from mechanical plumbing is advisable. A template that covers all of those can really bloat quickly. So I would advise that you at least separate it that way. And even our mechanical and plumbing department have separate models typically for those two trades as well. And then how should we start this template? Should we start from scratch, from nothing, and put everything in it? That gets to be pretty tricky. So I would advise, and what I'll be doing today is starting with one of Autodesk's out-of-the-box electrical or at least MEP systems type of template to get started with. And I'll cover what is in that out-of-the-box template as we get started. A big question is, what should you put in this template? We're going to be dealing with settings and setting up views and including some families. So think about those things that you would use in about 90% of your projects. If you do a lot of multifamily, like apartments, you'll have a lot of those kind of families installed. If you do medical or schools, things like that, you may have families associated with those specialties. But think of things that you would use in about 90% of your projects so that you don't have to repeat those tasks every time. And finally, the other 10%, let's say, of families, we'll put those into a warehouse or a library style project that you can easily bring in to those specific projects. So enough talk, let's get right into Revit and get this thing started. So like I mentioned, we're going to be creating this template in Revit 2022. It's the oldest version that we still create projects in. So this is just like starting a new project. Your opening screen, you can go to New. And instead of New Project, however, we're going to create a new project template. And instead of starting from none, we're going to start from a template. So we're going to use one of the out-of-the-box templates from Revit. Plus, we're going to be going Imperial. We're in the US, not metric. You can see we have construction, architectural, structural, or systems type templates that have different settings and some different views set up. Systems would be our MEP. So start with the Imperial Systems template and say OK. This will act just like a typical project. But we're actually in the raw template file. I want to cover what is in this template so we know where we're starting from. First of all, the most obvious thing here in the browser is we have a number of views already set up. Under electrical, lighting, and power views, we have mechanical, HVAC views, and we have plumbing views. So these are what are set up out of the box, and it's for all three systems. Like I mentioned before, what you don't have in your template, it can be as important as what you do have in your template. So we, as an electrical only template, do not need any of the mechanical information or plumbing. So we will get rid of those. So what we can do is just start deleting views. Well, we can merely just say delete, 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 delete. There we go. It doesn't take long at all. Deleting all open views in a project's not allowed. Well, it's because I'm in the mechanical view now. So let us go to the electrical power plan, and then I can delete that. So delete, and it doesn't take long at all. Now we are purely electrical. Another thing I like to do up front is let's get this thing saved right now. We're going to save it as a template. We can't even save it as a project. And save it as a template and put it wherever you want to put your templates for your future projects. I'm here in my ER folder, so we're going to call this ER electrical template. And I like to put the version on it. And let's save that with one backup. Save it. Okay, now that is saved. Okay, so continuing on with what is in this out-of-the-box template, there are no legends. We have some kind of an outdoor air schedule, which again, electrically we don't need, so we can delete that. Now here's the families that are in it. And yes, it's going to have some mechanical and plumbing, and you can get rid of these if you want. It will make the project smaller, so I'm not going to do it right now, but you can go ahead and get rid of those. But let's take a look and see what is in here for electrical. Electrical equipment, they've got a transformer, a switch, a couple panel boards, 2 different voltages, main lug only. And then for electrical fixtures, we have a receptacle. For lighting devices, we have a switch. And for fixtures, we have a recessed lighting fixture. So, as you can see, there's not much in this template. We're going to be adding a lot to it. Let's check other things. If we go up to manage, we can take a look at the project units, and we can see that it is all set up for square feet and feet and things like that. So that is set up. Under the MEP settings, we can look at electrical settings and we can see what's in here. You can see in here there's a number of things set up. For wiring, it's got tick marks set up. We have wire sizes all set up. So all this is part of that template, which is why we want to start with an electrical template. You do not want to have to create this stuff from scratch. So there's a few distribution systems already in here and additional settings. There's some line styles in here already set up. So it's a good place to start. Let's get into customizing this further for our electrical needs. One of the first things I like to do is create what's called a starting view. If you look at some of my other videos, you'll see that when I open a project, I end up with a starting view that is not just a floor plan or even a very detailed 3D view, things like that. You want to open up your project in a simple to render type of view. Otherwise, you can end up waiting 10 minutes for this thing to open up to the 3D view. Also, this starting view can have some information about the project. So let's see what I'm talking about. A starting view is actually a sheet. So we're going to create a new sheet that has starting view information in it. So let's go to View and go to Sheet. And there is a built-in Autodesk title block that we can use. And we just don't need a title block for this opening sheet. It's just a blank sheet. And we're just going to use some text. Again, this is a beginner's starting template, so we're not going to get super fancy. We just want to get something on the board that we have to work with. So this can be very simple, and I'll zoom in so I can actually see it. You can just put project starting view. And again, this can get fancy as you go. You can get a nice title block and a frame around this, but for now, we just want to get some basics in here. Project starting view. What we put in our our beginners template was things like, don't open local file. You don't want to start from a local. You want to start from your central file. Create local copy, daily, things like that. And then you can have things like who's on your team. You can put, project lead is so-and-so. And then you can put in, you can put other team members. You can put things like files. You can say ARC files downloaded from BIM 360. You can put things in like this to remind the team members or even yourself when you work on this project later where your client's files are coming from. Sometimes they'll email them to you as an attachment. Sometimes you'll have to download them from BIM 360, or sometimes there's other places, Smartsheet, Procore, things like that you receive your information. It's a nice reminder here to have this on your starting view. So again, use this starting view to not only easily open up the project, but to put down some project-specific information that is helpful to your team. And again, expand on this over time. But this is the basics. So now that we have this view created, how do we set it to actually be the starting view? Well, if we go up to Manage and go towards the right, Manage Links, Decal Type, Starting View, there's actually a button for creating the starting view. It specifies the view that first displays when you open the model. Click that, and then you can select this view, unnamed, and we can just call this 000 starting view. Simple as that, so it's always at the top. And now this is flagged as the starting view that will always open up when you create a new project. So the next thing I like to set up is the electrical settings. Now I showed you that we already have a bunch of those set up, so I'm going to leave those as the default, except there's a few things I like to change. And you can go through these one by one if you want. But under General, down under Circuit Sequence, I like to set up how my circuits are assigned as I add them to panels. So right now it's numerical in order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, we prefer, at least on panels, to go with odd then even. And I cover a lot of this in my panel schedules video, which I'll put in the description below. But odd then even, that's the default. And that's used mainly in panel boards. Now for switchboards, I like it in order, but we can make that change to the switchboard families themselves, like I show in that video. And then another thing I like to set up is wiring. You have your hot, ground, and neutral tick marks on the wiring, on the conduit or cable that you draw. And these are all long. Well, you may have a company standard that you follow from the CAD days that you would like to follow. So what we do is we go, the hot wire gets to be a short. We make it a short wire. The ground wire, some people use a little circle or a hook. We use the circle. And then the neutral wire, we leave it as the long wire. So we have a short, long, and then a circle tick mark for ground. And then down here under show tick marks, always, we don't typically show those on every single arc of wiring. We show them on the home run only. So we can go home runs. And then the last thing that I like to change here is under wire sizes, I like to set the default to copper. Now we use a lot of aluminum in projects for the larger feeders. And frankly, I don't use Revit's wire sizing. I may take a look at it for feeders and such to get an idea that, oh, what are they recommending? Do I need to upsize this? And then I'll actually do my own voltage drop calcs, things like that. But I at least want it to be copper out of the gate. Now, distribution systems. Now, I've covered this in other videos where I have determined that these three systems are not enough for my projects. Now, like I mentioned before, you want to include things in this template that will cover maybe 90% of your work. Right now, we have a 120-208Y, 3-phase 4-wire, a 12240 single phase or split phase 3-wire for residential, single family dwelling, or small commercial, and then a 48277 3-phase 4-wire. We still do a lot of multifamily, which is apartments, with single phase panels or load centers, but they are a 12208 single phase, not 240. So I need to add that distribution system into my template. I show how to do that in another video, but it's quick enough. Let me do it right now, just to walk you through it. So it's simply just give it a name, 12208 single. I'll follow their naming convention. Single phase, and it is going to be a 3-wire system, and the line-to-line voltage will be 208. The line, they say line to ground, and they mean line to neutral also, would be 120. So this sets up a 12208 single phase system as well. Under conduit settings, there's a rise drop symbol for up and down conduits. The conduit rise drop annotation size, which is a green circle put onto a plan view for a conduit that's vertical, is a full 1/8 of an inch. It's pretty big. So I like to get this down to something like a 32nd of an inch, just to indicate that there's a conduit there where I show conduits on floor plans, but I don't need this giant 1/8 inch green circle. And then down under load calculations, you can get into your load classifications. Of course, I have a video on load classifications and demand factors that you can see the details of this. But there's a number of load classifications built into this template, and it has most of what I need. It has lighting and receptacles, and it even has HVAC, so I can itemize that. You may find other load classifications you would like to itemize as well, maybe for a utility load summary. Sometimes utilities, at least around here, get pretty specific on how they want things done. They want things, elevators pulled out from other motors, and they want HVAC separate. Well, they also want EV charging separate. Well, there's no EV charging in this, so I add EV charging as a load classification. I have a video specifically on adding EV charging points, as well as how to add their load classification. And even some states have a special demand factor for that EV charging that gives you some diversity. But the basics here are just click on New and put in EV charging like that. You've created a load classification. Now we need to apply a demand factor to that EV charging. And in a lot of states, it's just treated as a continuous load. So you would do something that's continuous. I can create a demand factor called continuous, for example, and put it at 125%. And therefore, my EV charging setup is continuous. For like the state of Washington, I'm out here in the Pacific Northwest. State of Oregon has, again, a diversity factor applied for if you have a certain number of chargers, then you can apply an 80% or 90%, 70% demand factor. So we can create that as well. But for now, we'll just go with continuous, which is going to be most of your cases. And then a little thing I like to add here under panel schedules, you can change what you label your spares and spaces. And on my spaces, we typically call it a blank. And we like to merge multi-pulled circuits into a single cell so they show visually. Again, on my panel schedules video, I show all of that. But this is just an idea of some of the things that we do to our template. They seem like little petty little things, but maybe you found yourself at the beginning of every project having to go in and do all of this. So this will save you countless hours of time to get this into your template. So the next thing I like to do is deal with some additional settings. Up here under additional settings, there's line styles. Expand this out. You'll see that there's a lot of built-in line styles. You've got green hidden lines that are dashed. You've got regular black hidden lines. We've got medium lines, wide lines, thin lines. So a lot of this works for us. Now, if you have specific line styles you would like, maybe you'd like a thicker line style, a super wide, or I like to have specific line styles for my single line, one line diagrams. So maybe I'll put in a new one called, and I use all caps, one line, existing. And I'll make that maybe up here at 4 black, but I don't want solid. Maybe I want this some kind of a hidden, 1/8 inch hidden, and apply that. Also for my one line diagram, I like a nice fat type of bus type of line style. So I'll add that. I'll say one line bus and make that maybe up at 10, 8 or 10, something like that. And you can set that. This is the line weight, how wide that line is. So you can set those up. You can also add maybe a colored, maybe you want some different colors. We like to have at least a red line style for markups that may be happening by a peer review or a manager. So you can set that up, just call it red. And of course, go through and change the color to red. So you can set up your line styles that you need. And then another additional setting I like to deal with is under halftone underlay. This is the visibility of, for example, your LinkedIn architectural model. Underlay is fine, but down here under halftone, 50% tends to be a little dim, not bright enough. So I'll bump that up maybe to something like 70, but you can set that to what you want. And then some more settings to deal with, and they're all over the place. Up here under object styles, this is where you pick the line weights and colors and patterns for the actual model elements and annotative elements. So for example, under annotation, unless you go in and customize every single family you use to apply a custom line type to it, you're going to find out that your generic annotation right here, this generic annotation is what your symbols use, receptacle symbol, equipment connections, symbols, anything you do symbolically with an annotation is going to use this. So we like our symbols to pop, so I usually put those up to about a 4. Okay, so now the next thing I set up is my panel schedule templates. And this is a big one. I have that video that I'll refer to in the description below to get you to my ultimate guide on panel schedules, because there's a lot there. But the basics are, go to Manage Templates. We can manage our branch panel templates, or we can manage our switchboard panel templates. Now, there's only one default switchboard, and there's about 3, in this version of Revit, there's 3 different versions of branch panel. The auto shading pretty much just means that if you use a 42 circuit schedule for a 30 circuit panel, it will shade the phases for the remaining. I don't find that useful, but it's in there. And typically I actually just get rid of that one. And then feed through lug panel. You can use that as a separate panel schedule if you want feed through lugs, or you can customize a template to include that feature in with your normal panels. And if we go into the editor, and again, I cover this in that video, but you'll see that this has, up top, has a mains rating and a main circuit breaker rating. So this is set up as a main circuit breaker type of schedule. Well, you're going to have panels that are main lug only. So what do you do about this main circuit breaker rating showing up? It's very confusing to the installer or purchaser of this panel. So we go through and create our own template that is a main lug only style panel. So again, you can follow along in that video and see how to add different templates. Same with switchboard. We like to have not just a switchboard, we like to have a meter center created. We like to have a generator schedule created. So you can create all of those. So get whatever schedules you would use, again, in 90% of your projects, get those created and into your template. Okay, the next thing we look at for setting wise is text. If you hit the text button up top, you'll see drop down that there's only a 1/4 inch Arial style and a 3/32 Arial, and then there's a schedule default, which is used, of course, in schedules. So we like to add a few more styles to this. For example, under 3/32, look at this type, and you'll see that the leader arrowhead is a 30-degree arrow, and we've decided that we like a filled 15-degree arrow. So you can play around with that. And we just modify that out of the box. And then we also like to add other types. Let's say we're going to duplicate this, and we're going to call this a loop. So it has not an arrow, but it's a loop. And so down here under arrowhead, we actually want a loop. And we'll use maybe the 1/8 inch loop. And so that will draw a loop. Do that, and you'll see that you have a little loop on the end of this. So maybe you want one of those in your template. Another one we use for text, like I mentioned, is red for markups. Well, we have red lines, so I also like some red text. Maybe I'll go with this standard Arial. I'll duplicate it, and we're going to call it red. And so we just simply create a red. Again, simple little things, but they add up. So now we have red. So go through and create any text styles that you might need. Maybe you need 1/8 inch text for government projects, things like that. Maybe you would like some bold or italic, different styles of fonts, different, not even Arial. Maybe you want some other fonts. There's a huge selection of fonts in here. If you go down to text font, Arial, you have all of your TrueType fonts that are loaded on your machine available. So you can go crazy with fonts in here. But get those set up. So next we will look at which model related elements can we customize. And that has to do with views and view templates, things like that. As you can see, we have lighting floor plans and ceiling plans. Our firm doesn't do a lighting floor plan. We actually use ceiling plans for our lighting, and we just call it a lighting plan. So we typically get rid of lighting floor plans. But before I get too crazy with actual plans, we need to realize what plans are created from. They're created from the levels that are in our model. So we need to look at our levels. And the best way to look at that is from an elevation. So let's just click on something like a south elevation. And we can see the template now has a level 1 and a level 2, and they're 10 feet apart. Now, some firms, and we used to do it this way, will delete level 2 and just keep level 1 in their template and copy monitor the rest of the levels from a linked architectural model. And that's one way to do it. And then you're, of course, creating levels every time. We've since decided that we prefer to have a number of levels predefined in our template that we can just move around and easily use the align tool to align with our architecture. The benefit of having multiple levels already in here is that we can create multiple default plan views in our template to go with those levels. And we've decided that if I have 5 levels in my template, and I only have 2-story building, it's easy to delete levels. It's fast. Easier than creating new levels and new views. You can actually just copy these, which is handy. And you may decide that 10 feet's not what you want. But it really doesn't matter because we're just going to match these to our architectural link anyway as consultants. And it comes up with this name. The last name that the person doing this template used was mechanical. So we're going to change this name to level 3 and level 4. Level 5. These are just placeholders. They're going to be actually floor, first floor, second floor, roof, things like that. But that at least gets us 5 levels. One thing you should also try to establish is a naming scheme for these views. There's a lot of options for naming views. The ones I've seen most typically used are names that help sort your views in an order. Some people will use a sheet naming convention. If your lighting plans are always the E2 or E200 series, you can put that here as well as in the sheets. And that way people know that these are E200 sheet views. Personally, I think it gets a little confusing when you're looking at the same name of a view as you are a sheet. So I will merely label these with an arbitrary number to get them sorted properly. The title on your sheet can be different than this. This is just for your design team to keep things straight. And I may go 0 to second floor plan lighting. And then I will follow through with my other floor plans. First floor power. And same thing here, 02, second floor. And then if I end up having a site plan, I may end up calling it 00 site plan. And as you see, we're going to create some more views, maybe some coordination views, things like that. That can be a totally different series. Like it can be up in the 101 instead of just 01 and 102. And just whatever helps you to organize things. I may have different 3D views and elevations. I typically don't drag in these elevations to a sheet, but I may have other custom elevations, sections, things like that. So come up with a good naming scheme for these things to help you line them up. And also realize that right now we have an electrical discipline. And if you look to the right, you can see discipline for this floor plan. Discipline is electrical. Now the subdiscipline down here is power, and then it automatically lines these up by view type. Perhaps we want more subdisciplines. Well, how do you add subdisciplines to this? There's no way to add a subdiscipline to this. Let's say I want a demo plan. Well, the way you add a subdiscipline is kind of convoluted, but you actually have to go into a plan and do it there. Let's take this power floor plan right now and duplicate it. We don't have any detailing in it, so we don't need to worry about that. There's no annotations. Just duplicate that. So now I'm in my copy of first floor. Now over here under subdiscipline power, if I just click in power, I can type in my own subdiscipline. Let's go demo. You hit demo and apply it. And you'll notice on the left, it added demo as a subdiscipline. So now I can call this 01 first floor plan and call it demolition. So now I have demolition plans. And I can do the same for other floors. Or if your electrical practice also includes low voltage or technology, fire alarm, teledata, things like that, you can create subdisciplines, which we do. We call one technology. And then all of the technology plans are in a separate heading in the project browser. So use that subdiscipline to your advantage to help sort things out as well. So I'm going to duplicate this and get a site plan in here because that's something I have on 90% of my projects. 00, site plan power. And this is just an electrical site plan for us. It can have lighting on it as well. And I want to make sure I get my dashes and all that set up properly. Now I need to create views for the rest of my levels. Well, you just do that under View, Plan Views, and we're using floor plans. But before I do that, I want to show you something else I set up first, and that is the almighty View template. Not only is this project template very important, but the view templates within that project template are extremely important as well for efficiency and quality. So let's take a look at that. Let's jump into our first floor power plan, double click it so we're looking at it's active. Down here under view template, there is no view template assigned to this power plan. If we look in here, there's some built-in view templates for floor plan, architectural, electrical, mechanical, plumbing. So if we look at this electrical template, we'll see that it is not just for power or lighting, it's for both. We can start from this one and just copy it and call this one. To make it custom, I put that in front. And I like to put a scale in each of these since the template is scale dependent because we have include on the scale. So let's go in and see what do we want for a power plan only. We want to go through and we could get rid of cable trays, things like that if we're not using those for power. Some people have those in their power plan, so we can keep that on. And whether or not you're going to show conduits in a power plan, we'll leave those on for now. But if we later decide to make separate what I call distribution plans that show the conduit routing, we may turn those off. But for a basic power plan, we just don't want any mechanical systems on. We want the electrical on. We can turn off the lighting. Now I usually leave plumbing fixtures on because I want to see sinks so that I can put a receptacle nearby, so we'll leave that on. And we don't have any mechanical systems in this model. If we later on link in a plumbing or HVAC, we can change these settings and maybe change the settings in the link. But for now, we are just going to leave these here. So we should be good with just the lighting turned off. So we also want to make sure that we have the model displayed properly. The detail level we have for medium, and you can go between coarse and medium. I typically have coarse for a two-dimensional plan view. And we're set up for discipline of electrical, and subdiscipline is power, so we're all good there. And then now view range. View range is going to be very dependent upon the architectural model that we bring in. But as a raw starting view range, we have the bottom at the associated level, 0 offset. The cut plane around 4 feet seems to work. And the top is the level above 0 offset. Now again, that can mess us up if the level above doesn't happen to be the next floor. But for now, as a default, this seems to work as a starting point. So that's what we will leave. So now we've created that view template, but we need to assign it to this view. So we'll make sure we're in this view. And down here, it looks like it switched it over to ER power plan for us. Let's go into second floor, and you can see that there's no view template. So we want to set that to the power plan. So that's all ready. We also need a separate view template for the site plan. Now, this is assuming that you've done a few site plans already, so you already have an idea in your head what you do want on or off. So that's kind of where these get developed. I mean, my template's been developed over the years of use in projects and experimentation and finding out what works and doesn't work. So we just want to get this started as a basic template right now. So let's create that. Now, what do we want to start with? Well, I would go ahead and start with the electrical plan because my site plan has both power and lighting. I show parking lot lighting, things like that, as well as site power. So I'll start with this one. I'm going to copy it, get the ER in there, and let's go site plan. Now, what scale? Site plans are typically I would call a civil engineering scale. 1 inch equals 10 feet equals 20, 30, 40, 50 feet. I'm going to do a 20 foot as a starting point. And the other thing I'll mention here is we really need to create some templates for a number of scales. It's nice to have a few different scales in your template so that you or your users don't have to create them on the fly in each project. So we'll go back and do that. But changing the scale here is very easy. So ER site plan 20 feet. Let's get that scale set up properly. 1 inch equals 20 feet right there. I want to go with the course. I'm going to go ahead and leave both electrical and lighting on. Now let's look at our lighting plan. For this, similar, let's start with the electrical and duplicate it. Lighting plan, 1/8 inch as a starting point. That's good. Let's go with detailed course. And let's turn off some electrical stuff. But I like to leave electrical equipment on my lighting plan. I want to see the panel boards. I want to see the switchboards on my lighting plan as well. So I only need to turn off the electrical fixtures. And we'll say OK for that. And then get that assigned to the second floor. Now, first floor demolition plan, we can set one of those up. If you don't do any remodels, you don't need to worry about that, but I would go in and probably just set that up. When you get into demo plans, you start getting into phasing. You'll have 2 phases, an existing and a new construction, but you'll have some items that may be demolished in new construction. There's a whole thing about phasing, which will be a separate video. So I'm going to skip the demolition plan template for now. But we also want to set up some of these other views. A 3D electrical view, we want to set this up with the view template. We don't have anything to see right now in our model to set this up. So you kind of have to play with this in an existing model to see what settings you want. But from experience, this is what I usually set up with. So let's see what we have here. Now, it's interesting when you jump into 3D view, it gives you all of these other kinds of view templates, elevations, plans, reflected in the section, all kinds of view templates in here. Now, Again, when we're done, we can go back and delete the ones that we don't want so they're not confusing for users. But right now we're going to I'm going to start with the electrical plan because that will have lighting and power because my 3D views are going to have both. Now, you also want to think about if your 3D views are going to include the building or will it just include the electrical systems? You may want two kinds of templates. The one that I typically create, though, is just for my electrical system so I can see my electrical system in 3D. And then later on, we'll get into adding coordination views. So my electrical plan, I'm going to duplicate this and I'm going to call this 3D electrical. And then we need a scale on this as well. And sometimes I do these at 1/4 inch. So I'll bump this up to 1/4 inch. Now, on a 3D view, I want a higher level of detail. So I typically go with fine. I want to see 3-dimensional conduit, 3-dimensional panel boards, etc. And then the model is going to have both lighting and power, so I will leave that okay. One thing I like to mess with on 3D views is this thing called model display, right here. Model display. You can pick whether you have wireframe, hidden lines, shaded, consistent colors, or realistic. Now, I like the shaded view for conduits. I turn off edges and I turn on smoothing. And that got assigned to the 3D. Now, for elevations, these are typically just used for observing levels, observing the model, their exterior elevations. So I don't really do anything with those. They are usually used as for a construction view, coordination view. Now, the next thing I like to do is I like to have a section view. I don't have any sections cut, and I can still create a template for that. So let's just go in here and take the 3D because it includes lighting and power. So we will duplicate this, and let's get the ER section electrical. And let's go ahead and do this one at 1/8 inch. Again, you may want to set up a couple. Depends on, again, how you use these in your designs. Detail fine. I like fine on a section as well. And then we go into model display. On a section itself, I do a little differently. I do like to show the edges on that. And that's just the edges of the conduit. It draws a black line. And again, I'll have a separate video that shows how all those look. But we just want to get this established into our template. And one thing that a number of people do that I tend to do is I pull these out because these, it seems like every time I bring in an architectural link, I have to pull these out of the way. So let's just get those out right now. So now that we have some basic view templates, we can create the rest of our levels, the rest of our floors. Again, I like to have 5 floors in my template, and I can always delete them later. One thing we can do to help in setting up floor plans is under plan views, when you go to floor plan, since floor plans are going to be power plans and ceiling plans are going to be lighting plans, we can set this up to use the template we want. So again, what we're doing is in the new floor plan, it's called floor plan. This is how we could create levels 3 through 5. Under edit type, identity data, view template applied to this new view, we can set this up to use our power plan as a default view. So now, anytime we create an additional floor plan, it will use that 1/8 inch power plan as a default. So let's hit shift and select all of these. Say OK. And there they are. They automatically come into the right place because they're using the right template. Same thing with lighting plan. If you go to plan views and go to a reflected ceiling plan, same thing. For a ceiling plan, edit the type and set the view template to be your lighting plan 1/8 inch. That'll save you some steps later. So anytime you create a new lighting plan, either here or in your actual project, they will show up where you want them. And then it's just a process of going through and renaming them. And I'll skip that for now. That would give us all of our floor and ceiling plans that we need for a 5-story building. And again, I take the time to go through and create a few other scales. Most of our overall plans are done in 1/8 inch and then 1/4 inch for enlarged plans. So you can go through and create more of these. Now, a little trick that I use when duplicate, if I say duplicate, elsewhere in Revit, it would type the name of this in here for you to edit, but not here. So what I do is just go to rename, copy this, Control-C, copy that. And then when I go to create duplicate, I paste it, and then I can just simply change the scale. And change the scale, and that's all I need to change to have a whole nother template. Simple as that. Same with power. I need to get into a power plan so I can get to those templates. I need to be in a floor plan to get to these templates. When I jump into a floor plan, it filters out the floor structural and area plans. I could put this to all so I can see every single type of plan and get to them all here, but I leave it filtered like that. It helps the user later on. But power plan, we want to copy that. You can right click, copy it as well, and say duplicate. And let's go 1/4 inch. Okay. You can create 3/32, 1/16 of an inch, anything you want. Now, another type of floor plan that we use when we do multifamily, if you're doing any apartments, is an enlarged unit plan. And you may have other enlarged plans, but those are typically at 1/4 inch. So if I need to create that on the fly, I can use that 1/4 inch template and just rename it for unit plans and set other things like a filter or things like that. The last kind of view template that I like to set up is for coordination views. If you've been using Revit for a while, you probably realize that many times you want to coordinate different trades or even coordinate your electrical with the architectural model. So you want to have views that show everything. A lot of times in a lighting plan, I want to see the architect's lighting layout or the interior designer's lighting layout in my plan. So I have a separate view template called coordination that has those turned on. And so I don't have to turn them on and off manually in my production view or my sheet view. So what I will do is I will create another set of views called coordination. And it's okay to have a lot of views over here. As long as you have a good naming convention, then things won't be confusing. I'll do one for an example. For my first floor plan, I will take this and duplicate it. And then I will give it a name like 101. Now, I don't capitalize these because I'm not going to drag them onto a sheet. That's one of my naming conventions, is lowercase means just a working view, coordination view. So I'll say first floor plan, power, and then I'll do something like this to make it stand out. And I've labeled it 101 so that it will sort down below everything else because these will be changed to the proper names. But it sorts out all of my coordination views. And then over here under power plan, I will use my rename trick and create a duplicate view template. And I'll put coordination in here. And maybe I'll do that for a couple scales. Let's get coordination in here. Okay. And then what I do differently in coordination is I will go back through and make sure that I have everything turned on. I want ducts and everything turned on, because when I bring in a mechanical or plumbing model, at first it will use the settings in this host model originally, unless I go through and make it custom. But I also want lighting on, mechanical equipment. I go through and make sure all the piping is turned on. I just make sure everything is turned on that I might want. And that's a good point. I need to make sure my rooms are on in my other view templates as well. Raster images lets PDFs show. So we just want to make sure most everything is on. And you could just hit all if you want and select it all. I like to kind of look at them. Annotation. Let's make sure that we have room tags on. Okay, all that's good. So let's go through and make sure that we have rooms on in all of these. Because if you've seen some of my previous videos, you've seen that we go to put room tags in and the rooms are not on. For some reason in the default REVIT view templates. And then I do the same thing for my lighting plan. I duplicate a lighting plan with a similar naming convention. And then I would also create a coordination view template. So you get the hang of it. And we've removed any of the, what I call distracting views that aren't what we want. So the next thing I like to do is to set up some sheets. And some people call this cartooning, set up cartoon sheets. They're placeholder sheets. So let's go up to sheet. And we only have the default Autodesk title block, as you can see, which is fine for now. If you happen to have your own company title block that you use for certain projects, you definitely want to bring that into your template so you have it available if you use it for many of your projects. We typically work with our client's title block. So we have an architect title block or maybe some other engineer's title block. And so that gets brought in later. But for now, we can just leave the Autodesk title block and we just want to start naming these sheets. So this naming scheme, of course, can change by client as well. Again, we as consultants have to follow the lead of our client. So I just usually use a generic name, E100, E200, E300, E400 series for the different sub-disciplines. And I'll just call this site plan. Electrical is one name we give these. And you can name them the way you normally do. And then I just go through and create more sheets. E200, maybe I'll start with 201. First floor plan, lighting. Again, some people call these ceiling plans, but frankly, a lot of our lighting isn't just on the ceiling. It's wall mounted. It can be ground mounted if it's maybe an interior courtyard with a pole or a bollard. So it's not always a ceiling plan for lighting. So we just call it a floor plan. So I would create 5 sheets for all floors of lighting, and I would create 5 sheets for all floors of power. Again, it's a lot of the busy work that you were doing now once, so you don't have to do it over and over. For floor power. And then I would go in and do things like set up a sheet for a one-line, single-line diagram. And that's usually our 500 series. So 501, one-line diagram. And then we typically have other sheets beyond that. Again, just do whatever your company standard is, but get those in here. And we have panel schedules. Maybe you have a series of E400s for electrical details. But go ahead and just make sheets for all these views. Maybe you have a set of enlarged plans. Let's go ahead and do one. We typically do have some enlarged plans, at least of units for multifamily or for other types, schools, things like that. At least electrical rooms we have enlarged views. So let's start off with the 400 series. Enlarged floor plans. Electrical. So you get the idea. Get all your sheets set up. So like I mentioned at the beginning, I'm going to show you what families to bring into your template that you can use in 90% of your projects. So we're going to go to the Autodesk Cloud and bring in a number of out-of-the-box families. Then I'll show you the custom content that I recommend you create for your beginner template. So the first set of families we will take a look at now are the electrical equipment. So let's go down to our families and electrical equipment. We notice that all we have in this template to begin with is a dry type transformer, an Ethernet switch, which we're not going to worry about, and 2 panel boards, a 208 main lug only and a 480 main lug only. So we need to bring in more of these pieces of equipment. Now, I've shown in a previous video that there's quite a bit of distribution equipment and generation equipment in the Autodesk family cloud up here. So we can bring those in and use those. Now, as you get further into your Revit experience and want to develop this template further, I'd recommend getting in and customizing these items. But for now, this will get you going. So let's go ahead to the cloud and load some things in. So we go load Autodesk Family, and all results typically comes up first. We want to go down to electrical. Now, even under electrical, there's architectural. We do not want any of these families. They have a panel, they have a duplex receptacle, they have other kinds of receptacles, and you bring those in, they do not have the electrical connectors that we need to connect to our systems. I've had a number of questions from people new to Revit noticing that their panel or their receptacle don't have the connectors needed. Well, they probably brought in an architectural version. So stay away from this architectural tab. We want to go to the MEP type of equipment. So under MEP, we have a number of things, connectors, power things, and then we get into the technology and low voltage type things. Let's bring in a wet transformer. I would call a oil-filled transformer. Down here, there's a wet type. If you want to show a utility transformer in your projects, this would be like a pad mount. You can bring this in, and we can only bring one at a time. So we'll bring that in first, and it just populates under your electrical equipment tab over here in your project browser. So let's bring in another thing. I want to bring in the generator. I like to have a generator in my projects. I maybe don't have one in 90%, but I at least have it in 50%. So I go ahead and bring it in, but that's up to you. So we'll bring that one in. And then we need a switchboard. So we can use their switchboard, go back to electric power, and we want distribution now. Circuit breaker switchboard is what we want to bring in. And then I'd like to add some more panels. We have main lug only panels. Let's get some main circuit breaker panels in now. So load. And if we go down to lighting and appliance, you'll see here's the 480. This is main lug only. This is 480 main circuit breaker surface. And that's the other thing. These, because they don't say anything, are recessed. We also want surface. So we're going to end up with a lot of different panel boards. For example, here, we already have that. This is a surface. Let's bring this surface one in. And in some versions, later versions, you can select multiple of these to bring in. So we don't have to do this so many times. Here's the main circuit breaker. Get that in. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3. We want a main circuit breaker recessed. One of the things, as a side note, I've done to customize my content is to combine all of these panel boards into just two versions, a surface or a recess, just because the graphics are so different. So that's another thing to strive for. And I'll probably do a video showing how I did that. It worked out pretty well. I must say so myself. So here's the there we have all versions of panel boards loaded into our template. The last piece of distribution equipment in here I would like is the transfer switch. If I'm going to have a generator, I'm going to need the ATS. I did a video covering about the built-in ATS only has a single upstream source, which doesn't really make sense because we need two sources. We want the loads from the ATS to populate into both of those sources so that the panel schedules work out. So I'm going to use my customized two-source transfer switch. So I'll go ahead and load that with load family. So here we go. ER automatic transfer switch is my customized version. You can see here's a circle up top, circle at the bottom that shows that it's two sources. So that is a pretty good batch of electrical equipment. The next batch of families I would like to bring in are electrical fixtures. Now, out of the box, we get a duplex receptacle. Now, it's just standard or GFCI. I would like things like an above counter receptacle, maybe a ceiling mount receptacle, and we can add those over time. But for now, this will do. I would like to get a quad, a double duplex in here, and we can get that off of the cloud as well. So let's go up here, electrical power, and they call these terminals. So receptacles, disconnect switches, duplex. The high voltage receptacle may be handy too. This is the one I've shown in a previous video that we can use for like a 208 single phase or 240 volt single phase, 2-pole type of receptacle. Let's get that in. And then let's also bring in that quad. And here's the quadruplex. I have a video about a number of these out of the box items, and I show how, some of these will work and won't work for us, at least in the US, like a receptacle 220, that's line to neutral 220, which is more of a European type of receptacle, so that doesn't work for us here. You can bring in whatever you think you need, but this is about all I need for electrical fixtures, except for some equipment connections. I use a customized motor electrical connection and a customized equipment like a heater, non-motor type electrical connection. REVIT has some built-in connectors that you can use, but let me bring in my custom ones. But even in the beginning, I really felt like I had to do some custom content. I used out of the box as much as I could, but you'll find that, for the look of your project and for the functionality of the project, you'll need to have some custom content. And I show how to make these in videos. So let me just get those loaded. And just to remind you what those are, you drag those in, and they look like a fuse disconnect with a connection, and this fuse can be turned on and off, and even the disconnect can be turned off with click boxes. And the same thing for the motor connector. It's a motor symbol. And again, I have a video of how I made these, and these, of course, can be connected with power and all of that. I like those to be in here, and this will pretty much take care of you for your connections. Most of these receptacles are actually posted to walls, so I need a wall in here to show this one. So let me just drop a wall for now, and this is how you can just add walls to your project if you need them, and get that guy there. So this is what that out of the box high voltage receptacle looks like. It has a power connector, and in the type properties, type parameters, we can adjust the voltage and the number of poles, and of course the classification and the load. So these 4 items are what you need mapped from that electrical connector into your family so that you can adjust this. So this can be even a 208 3-pole type of receptacle if you need that. Now the symbol may not be what you want. You can always edit the symbol. Again, that's custom content that you may want to deal with. But for now, this gets it into the template. Get rid of those. And the next group of families that I want to load are the light fixtures. I tried to use out-of-the-box light fixtures in my early REVIT modeling, and I just found too many roadblocks. Many are hosted. Even like the site lighting are hosted, and I don't always have a host for those. The pendant fixtures are hosted to a ceiling, so on a vaulted ceiling they come in diagonal. I show that in my full project series. Just too many roadblocks using the out-of-the-box lighting fixtures. So that's when I first got into creating custom content. All I can recommend is that either you learn to create that yourself, or you have someone from outside the firm create that for you, or get someone in your firm, in your practice, and maybe that's yourself, get up to speed with basic family creations so that you can at least make your light fixture. So I've brought those in already. There's a number of them. So let's go down to lighting fixtures, and you can see all of these. We'll start with an ER. And just to let you know, what I use in my basic template is an exit sign, a track for track lighting, a pendant circular, and a pendant linear. So I have 2 different shapes, and these all are parametric adjustable. I can change the size of the circular or the length of the linear and the width. I have a pole with fixtures for site lighting. Bring that in. I haven't shown that anywhere before. Let me pop into the 3D view. Okay, and I already have all these brought in so you can see these. But this is the pole, and it has a number of lights on it that can be adjusted down here under other. You can narrow it down to just one light fixture, and that can be rotated around. So I customized that. It's a nested family. And then here's the other fixtures I'm talking about. I have my track with my track head. A lot of these are unhosted, so we can move these around and adjust them vertically. I've got a wall mount linear. I've got my exit sign. And right now it's a single face, so you can turn that around. And then here's my circular surface. I have some linear surface. I have some linear no host. And I could just put an NH, but that's what NH means, non-hosted. So that this can be used, for example, as an under cabinet light. We don't need to mount it to a surface. Like, it's hard to mount to cabinetry, so it's just floating. And then the wall mounts. And here's the recessed type troughers or linears, if you will, and they can be adjusted for width. And then, of course, the recessed downlight. So this is the basic lights that we use, again, in 90% of our projects. Because they're adjustable, I can change the size of these circular fixtures and linear fixtures, and this deals with most of what we need. The other things you may add in the future to your template are maybe you have a linear LED tape type of application. That can be modeled as well. And if you look at these in plan view, if I go to lighting, a lot of these are instance parameters so that we can adjust their length. So if we go to the lighting plan, for example, this track, click on the track, there's little grips at the end. So I can drag this track and make it longer as needed. I can also just type it in over here and make it a 12-foot track. And then the track heads, as you can see in plan view, they have a symbol. All of these are symbols. They're not just the extrusion showing through. And what I have in these custom light fixtures, and I have videos on how to do some of these, is I include in a little emergency graphic in the right that I can turn on and off. So I can have different fixtures be emergency. But anyway, that's what I have in here for lights, and of course my exit sign that I've shown in other videos. But that's what I have in here for lighting. I've settled on the custom lights. The next set of families I would like to cover are tags. You'll want to tag home runs. You want to tag light fixtures. You may want to tag your panels. And even maybe tag some receptacles with either their circuit number or maybe their mounting height. There's all kinds of tags that you would like to have in your template so they're easy to get to. So those are under annotation symbols. And you can see down here, I have these already brought in. ER tag, I have electrical equipment name tag, electrical fixture panel and circuit tag, a fixture type tag, lighting fixture panel circuit, lighting fixture type, a wire tag panel circuit. So I can pretty much tag anything I need to. So this can just be dragged out and applied to a fixture. This is a question mark now because I don't have it typed. But that's what that is. So you'll want to get some tags in. And I do have videos showing how to customize these tags. They're fairly simple. It's a good first starter project for family editing to learn how to edit a tag. And you can even put some graphics around these tags. So if I go to an electrical fixture type tag, and let's go to our power plan. If I bring in an electrical fixture, get the motor in here, and if I call this motor exhaust fan 1, EF1, then of course, my fixture tag looks like that, and I can give it a leader, and I can even change this leader And that's another thing you may want to change, is get your arrowhead on your leaders as something that's in your template. So things like that. So you want to get tags made and get those brought into your template. And then as you can see here, I have a number of symbols, note boxes, note circles. So this can be a note box for note 1, a circle, as well as a diamond. So different styles of note tags. We use the hex a lot for a keyed note in our firm, but you may have different styles you use. Again, these are just annotations. They are very easy to customize. So another good starter family to learn to edit. And then the largest set of families to deal with, because there's not a single out-of-the-box one-line diagram symbol. So we'll take a look in here and you can see there's a lot of them. They're all custom. One-line circuit breaker horizontal, one-line circuit breaker horizontal small, vertical up and down, continuations, disconnects, fuse switches, everything for a single line diagram. If we were to start a drafting view, we'll call it one line. See what a lot of these symbols look like. I have a whole video showing electrical distribution, how we create one lines. And I even have a plugin there for this set of one-line diagrams that I offer for sale, because it's such a large group of symbols and does take a long time to get these set up, that you can just purchase to get your one lines going. But you can make these all yourself. They are just annotations. And again, I have a video showing how to create these annotations yourself. You can either make them yourself, have someone else do them. These have a built-in existing check so they can turn into dashed. And for example, this generator has a second breaker that you can add. So I've built a lot of functionality into these. And again, you can do that yourself. Panels have labels for these. This can be load center for unit 101. We have regular panels. We have motors. Motors that have, this can be elevator 1. And it has a number of things. So you can put a 480 volt. And let's say this guy is 55 amps. So it's got labels built into it. It makes things very quick. And again, all these have the existing button for when you have an existing system you want to connect to. So again, that is another round of custom content that I created to bring into my template, because there's nothing out of the box you can use. And showing my project video that you can just draw these by hand each time if you want. It's very labor intensive, and I wouldn't suggest doing much of that, maybe for a simple house. So another thing you'll want to do in your template is maybe put in a symbol list. That's just a drafting view or a legend that has all these symbols called out. Now, the difference between the drafting view, like this, versus a legend, a drafting view can only be dragged onto one sheet. So if you know you're only going to have a symbol list on like the first sheet of the set, then you're fine doing that. If you want a symbol list that shows up on multiple sheets, let's say you have a small one, then you would use a legend style of view, legend. And it looks just like a drafting view. Legends can be pulled onto multiple sheets. Now, the counter argument to that is legends cannot be brought in from other projects. So you can't have the legend in your warehouse or library project and bring it in. But you can bring in drafting views. So there's pros and cons either way. Make your decision which way you want to go with that. But get a symbol list into your template. You'll also want to create typical details. Maybe you want to have some typical one-line diagrams set up that has CT can and a main bus and things like that that you can start from, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time you start a project. Maybe you want to have some details for a pole foundation. Get some basic details drawn up in these drafting views that you can have in your template as well. You can also create a feeder schedule if you schedule your feeders that way, that has perhaps some of these feeder symbols, like we use an oval. And that can be something like a 200-4, and then you can have, just use your drafting lines to create a schedule. Create a schedule and get things in here. And you can use your schedule default, or you can just use your Arial and say 2-inch conduit, and you can put your conductors. So just create yourself a nice little schedule, and it's just text. Things like that. Get that set up and keep that in your template. And speaking of schedules, you can actually create your actual schedules. I show in another video how to create a mechanical equipment connection schedule. I show how to do lighting schedules. You can get those basic schedules brought into this as well. Now, if you've already created a schedule in another project that you would like to use, you can bring that in. And the way you would do that is simply go up to Insert and Insert from File over here. And you can insert a view from a file. It will open up your browser, go find your project, your other file that you already have that schedule in, and you can bring that into this template, and now it's saved in your template. You can also do that with details you already have, things like that. So that's a pretty good list of what you can put into your template to get things going, at least for a basic template. Now where do you go from here? You may want to do things like add more custom families, put in clearance boundaries around your electrical equipment, or add a meter base, add a meter center, add more specialty lighting, maybe some more non-hosted families, even for recessed fixtures. For instances when you don't have a good ceiling to deal with, and an EV charging station. I have a video on how to create that. Improve the 3D look of things if you're trying to do more 3D details. Maybe create more custom title blocks. Add more details. Bring in your library of CAD details. I strongly recommend that you do not just insert a CAD detail. You can link a CAD detail in and draw over it and create it in Revit, which is the best practice. You'll maybe want to add shared parameters. It's a whole nother video, is creating shared parameters that you can actually use in schedules. Over time, you can add more filters for visibility controls, like I use in the site plan and unit plans. You may want to do that for other kinds of visibility. Maybe you want to increase the specifications that you have in your drawings. Perhaps add some code review sheet. If you have ComCheck type code sheets that you want to get into Revit, you can create those. Add more actual schedules, not just production schedules for sheets, but even behind the scenes schedules that contain counts of items or costs, things like that. Schedules to help you find things in your project. Maybe you really decided you want to have some dummy links to other files in your template. That means you need to create a template project file, not just a template. Maybe you want further browser organization with some shared parameters to further divide things up. Also, you can customize those keyboard shortcuts that you use. Maybe you have some from CAD that you would like to bring into this. The number of things you can put in your template, of course, is endless. And again, just apply that 90% rule. I would recommend that it doesn't get too bloated. And then, of course, have your warehouse project that you can bring things in from. So go ahead and click on this next video to learn how to create some more custom content for your template. And thanks for watching.